Last night at 2:17, every child from Mrs. Gandhi's class woke up, got out of bed, went downstairs, opened the front door, walked into the dark, and they never came back. Except at the end of the film when they do. So last week I went to see Bring Her Back. Great movie. I made a video about it, links in the description. And when I was there, I saw the trailer for the new film Weapons. I had been hearing a lot of buzz about this film. The trailer was very popular, and all of my co-workers, at least the ones who like scary movies, were all buzzed to go see it. I had actually seen Barbarian for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and I really enjoyed that movie. So when I saw the trailer for Weapons, my interest was piqued. Generally speaking, I don't like watching trailers for movies I'm interested in going to see because most trailers are pretty bad. They kind of telegraph way too much before you get to see the film itself. I really prefer going in as blind as possible. But with that said, the Weapons trailer did a great job of kind of showing you everything and telling you nothing. So when my coworkers arranged a staff viewing of the film, I work in a cinema, I was more than happy to tag along. Overall, I enjoyed the film, but I have a couple of thoughts about it that I don't even think necessarily are criticisms, but are things I find myself thinking about now that I've seen it. The reaction among my colleagues seemed to be very mixed. One half of us, including myself, really liked it, while the other half seemed to be very bewildered about what the film was really about. So I will now unceremoniously go through some of the basic plot points to explore my thoughts a little more deeply and weigh in on what I consider to be pros and cons of Weapons. The story begins immediately after all of the children have run away from home. Pro: we know what the story is about based on the trailer, so I really appreciate that the film cuts to the chase. For the characters of the film, this event is an extremely bizarre occurrence, so we as an audience don't need to see a slow burn building up to the night in question. Now, don't get me wrong, I do love a slow burn like in The Exorcist or Fatal Attraction, but for the purposes of this story, I do think it benefits from hitting the ground running. As the story progresses from this inciting incident, we are shown excerpts of the overall plot from the perspectives of different characters. Beginning with Miss Justine Gandhi, the elementary school teacher whose class consists of the 17 students who have run away, there's only one remaining student, Alex Lilly. Justine is then the subject of media scrutiny, police investigation, and the ire of the parents, who believe that Justine must have had something to do with it. From watching the trailer, it became clear that the film was going to have something of a witch hunt allegory. Something which is made less of a subtext when Justine's car is vandalized and witch is written in red paint. Pro: I was right. As Justine is let go from her job in the school since it's hard to teach class with only one student, she begins to obsess over Alex, low-key, high-key stalking him as he travels to and from school. Do people still say low-key, high-key? I don't know. So here we get to what is probably the first con-ish moment of the film. Since Alex is the only child who hasn't gone missing, it's pretty obvious from Justine's perspective, and de facto the audience's perspective, that Alex is somehow involved, or at the very least knows something about the disappearances. More on that later. While stalking Alex's home, in which the windows are all covered in newspaper, Justine peeks inside to see Alex's parents sitting on the sofa, motionless, unresponsive, and yet awake. After calling the principal of the school to perform a welfare check, Justine evidently falls asleep in her car. At this point, the front door opens and out walks a woman holding a pair of scissors as she slowly approaches the car. Here is a major pro of the film. This moment is one of several in the film that just really gets under your skin. At least it did for me. That slow, creeping, uncanny sensation, which I feel is really rare in a lot of horror films today. Bring Her Back, for example, as much as I loved that film, really didn't have any of those really creepy sensations. A lot of what I liked about that movie was one, the acting, two, the story, three, it's fucking gross. Weapons, on the other hand, has such a bizarre, nightmarish quality to it. And for that alone, I do think it is well worth a watch for fans of scary movies. So the creepy lady steals a lock of Justine's hair, and then we cut to the next character whose perspective we follow, Archer. Archer is the father of one of the missing children. He's enraged at what has happened and what little seems to be done about it. He's continuously fucking up at his job as a construction worker, painting the front door red when it's supposed to be green. Perhaps he's the one who vandalized Justine's car.
Well, obviously, don't you think?
His relationship with his wife, as briefly as it is explored, seems to be at a cold point, and he obsessively examines the door cam footage of his son Matthew running away. One night while in Matthew's room, Archer has a nightmare in which he's following Matthew as he runs away. They run across the street to end up back in their own house, in that way that dreams can fudge with reality. But before he goes into the house, we see the shape of a gun. A big gun. A big war gun. I'm Irish, we only use hunting rifles. On this gun are the digits 217 or 217, the time when the children went missing. So horror movies tend to be a fertile ground for allegory, abstraction, metaphor. What's the difference between allegory and metaphor? Ah, I see. Confusing. But you see, I am here an idiot. I do impressions as well. Use of this gun imagery was one major point of contention among my colleagues who were less keen on the movie. When they asked, what was the point of the gun? My initial thought was military. Perhaps it is to liken the children to sleeper agents, that something has triggered them into this bizarre action, to what purpose we have yet to find out. Perhaps Archer spent time in the military, and the image of the gun is his subconscious manifesting the desire to seek out an enemy. Something which I felt had some traction in the next moment when Archer goes into Matthew's bedroom and has this really heart-wrenching moment when he tells Matthew, I'm sorry I don't say this often, but I do feel it. I love you. I thought perhaps if my theory about Archer being in the military is true, it would make sense that he struggles with expressing his emotions. But that's just a theory. A gay theory, and that's me, because I'm gay.
And that's me, because I'm gay.
Anywho, after having this nightmare, which features the same weird red-wigged woman that appeared in a nightmare that Justine had earlier in the film, Archer begins to put together that the children were all running in the same general direction. When he sees Justine at a gas station, he confronts her before Marcus, the principal of the school, runs towards them from a distance in the same pose as the children when they ran away, covered in blood, wide-eyed, and he charges Justine and tries to kill her. Another great creepy moment, the way Benedict Wong can get his eyes to bulge is really unsettling. After this moment, we go through a few more perspectives. Paul, Justine's ex, and a cop as he chases down a drug addict named James. We then go into James's perspective, whereby he breaks into Alex's house to steal for drug money. While he is there, he discovers that all of the missing children are standing in the basement. When he realizes that he can claim reward money for information about the children, he goes to the police station where Paul, who has assaulted James earlier in the film, chases him down again, and when James convinces Paul to go to Alex's house, the door opens, Paul walks in, and the door closes. Hours pass before Paul returns outside, only to drag James into the house. We now come to what is probably the biggest con for me. We enter Marcus and Alex's perspectives for the remainder of the film. First, Marcus. He is arranged for a welfare check with Alex's parents, but instead of his mother and father, in walks Gladys, Alex's great aunt. She is dressed like a 1980s Betty Davis on Snatch Game, which, honestly, I'm here for. Gladys wears a bright red wig, and it becomes clear that whenever Alex has been questioned by the police, it was Gladys that was with him and not his mother. In Marcus's office, Gladys claims that Alex's parents have been very ill and that she's been there to help take care of them. Marcus explains that in order to properly conduct a welfare check, he must speak with Alex's parents directly. In the next scene, Gladys arrives at Marcus's home and claims that she's missed her bus. When Marcus's husband says to invite her in, they all go to the kitchen to get Gladys some water in a bowl at her request. Then Gladys casts a spell. Taking a thorned twig wrapped in a ribbon she stole from Marcus's office, Gladys pricks her finger, rubs the blood over the twig, and snaps the twig in half. In an instant, Marcus brutally beats his husband to death, until Gladys drops the twig in a bowl of water, ending the spell. She then repeats the ritual, this time with the lock of hair that was cut from Justine earlier in the film. This causes Marcus to race to Justine and attack her at the gas station. The attack only ends when Marcus is struck by another car as he runs after Justine, who is driving away. Justine and Archer form an unlikely friendship, having survived the attack, and perhaps with Archer realizing that whatever is going on, it really has nothing to do with Justine. When Archer shows Justine a map that he has been using to draw the line of direction that his and another child in his neighborhood were running towards, Justine clocks that Alex's house is at the point of intersection. So now we get to Alex's point of view, and I feel like I've already talked at length summarizing the plot, so I'll try and wrap the summary quickly enough and then unload what I think is the biggest con of the film for me. Alex's parents prepare for the arrival of Gladys, his mother's aunt whose health is failing. One day, when they fail to collect Alex from school, he returns home to find them in a state of catatonia, the state that we have been seeing them in. Gladys introduces herself to Alex, since they have never actually met, and she quickly threatens Alex not to tell anyone about what is going on in his house. Gladys's health seems to improve briefly once his parents are under her spell, but one night Alex is called to Gladys's room. She instructs Alex to gather a personal item from each member of his classroom and bring it to her. Gladys performs a ritual in the dead of night to lure the children into the basement at 2:17, assumedly to use their energy to restore Gladys's health.
We're young! Well, younger.
Back to the present, Justine and Archer arrive at Alex's house where Paul, James, and Alex's parents are all possessed by Gladys. A big fight ensues, resulting in Justine grabbing Paul's police gun and killing both him and James. While Alex's parents are trying to break into his bathroom, Alex performs the same ritual that Gladys has been using to cause other people to attack for her, this time using a strand of Gladys's wig as the target of the spell. When he breaks the twig, Gladys is chased by all of the children in the basement in this really brilliant, chaotic sequence through the neighborhood before the children chase her down and literally rip her to shreds. Who wrote this, Euripides? Why can't I write for the Harvard Lampoon? So, okay, we've pretty much reached the end, and here's the thing. A part of me really enjoyed watching something so out there as a group of children literally ripping a witch to shreds. But once the film was over, there was this lingering feeling I had. One of not disappointment necessarily, but a sense of I've been told too much. When I first saw that trailer for the movie, and it begins with a reading of the paragraph that appears on the poster, the one I read at the beginning of this video, I thought that that was such an interesting premise for a film. As a true crime mystery podcast fan, that premise sort of elicited those bizarre cases that remain a mystery, like the Mary Celeste, or the disappearance of the Flannan Isle lighthouse keepers, or the Trump family, who in 2016 got into their car, leaving behind their passports, credit cards, all of their technological devices, and fled from their home in Melbourne for some unknown reason. What is endlessly fascinating about these cases is, of course, the mystery. We can endlessly debate about what really happened, but it is unlikely that a concrete answer will ever be provided. So, as far as weapons is concerned, I do wonder if the film could have been better served by not explicitly explaining everything that happened. In my Longlegs video, link in the description, I made a point about the utilization of the supernatural in horror films. But besides that, what I didn't like about the dolls in the film is that it left absolutely nothing to the imagination. Supernatural horror, I think, thrives on ambiguity. Why does Pazuzu possess Reagan? How does Reagan get the crucifix after Chris has taken it out of the room? Who sent the ball to Danny when he was by himself in the hallway? So young, so innocent. Weapons, not unlike Longlegs, is very clear about what is happening, how it's happening, and why it's happening. And Weapons is perhaps just a little bit weaker for it. What if there was an alternative version of the film whereby Alex wasn't the only child not to go missing? What if Justine, through no fault of her own, arrived to a completely empty classroom? What if she really does become the sole target of a witch hunt? And that brings me to another point. Isn't anything that the film has to say about the nature of witch hunts undermined by the fact that there is a literal witch in the film making all of this bad shit happen? I don't know, doesn't that kind of make it just a little too easy? Going back to the moment of the film when Archer is having that nightmare and he sees the gun in the sky, and we were asking, what does that gun mean? The film is called Weapons. Gladys, through the practice of witchcraft, turns people into her weapons to do away with anyone that gets in her way. In researching the reception to the film, I saw one review that really interested me. One of the greatest strengths of Krager's ambitious script is its abject refusal to connect every dot in the manner that so much elevated horror has done in recent years. Still, it's not overtly difficult to read the inciting incident of Weapons as a school shooting allegory. The school shooting allegory is a pretty interesting way to interpret the story, but to what end? Kreger blessedly refuses to highlight the themes as much as his peers, and yet the mystery of the missing children is solved within the context of the film. The source of this mystery is given a literal boogie woman who, like a Grimm's fairy tale, meets a poetically gruesome end. If I were to follow this interpretation of the school shooting allegory to its zenith, I would say that the gun violence in American society, speaking of course as an outside observer, is the natural result of leaden gun control laws in a country where access to mental health treatments are restricted through a fucked up system that capitalizes on healthcare. That is my honest opinion. I am not a sociologist, so I would recommend doing your own research on that issue before taking my amateur opinion to heart. So where would Justine fit into this witch hunt school shooter metaphor? Well, the scapegoat, of course. Justine becomes the target of the parents' ire as someone needs to be blamed for the loss of innocent children. In medieval Europe, it was a commonplace accusation that witches were the committers of infanticide. In Weapons, Justine is the accused witch who is responsible for what has happened. And if I may be so presumptuous, I believe that Justine's role in the film is the allegorical scapegoat of culture war issues in American politics. At a time when gun violence is an epidemic in America, who are the targets of the current administration? Who is being taken out of their homes by ICE agents? But you know what? I'm getting a little too real here. I'm making a silly, stupidly long review of a horror film. Let's move on. Weapons is a hell of a ride, and its indecisiveness to either obfuscate in the mystery of what is really happening or to be very blunt about it's a witch. It's a witch. She's a witch. Whether that is a flaw or not, I'm not sure. I definitely enjoyed it, and I was definitely creeped out, but I can't help but feel like there was this strange mixing of metaphors. That's rich coming from someone who still doesn't quite grasp the difference between metaphor and allegory. I swear I'll study the chart. But isn't that mixing of metaphors leading me to this sense of ambiguity that I believe makes the film itself a much more interesting piece of storytelling? Isn't that what The Shining is so praised for after all these years? On the one hand, it's a very straightforward story of domestic violence, and on the other, it is presented in a way that leaves so many more questions than answers. Perhaps Weapons is leaving more questions than answers, but on a more holistic level. The questions are about the film itself, and not the narrative, which in and of itself is pretty straightforward. So I clearly had a lot of thoughts about this film. If you're a fan of horror films, I would definitely recommend it. And yet, for all of those reviews I see where people felt somewhat disappointed in the way the narrative is executed, I kind of understand where they're coming from. I would really love to hear what other people thought about this movie. I would definitely consider seeing it again, but after some time with fresh eyes, if you could make any sense of my ramblings as I tried to articulate my very peculiar reaction to this movie, let me know in the comments below. And please, if you think I'm losing my grip on reality and you just think this film is a piece of shit, then feel free to tell me why. And if you enjoyed this video overall, maybe consider liking and subscribing. I make video essays on films, literature, and art, just a mishmash of whatever it is I'm interested in, and I hope to be back again very soon.